Hi everyone, welcome to a Face Project podcast. My name is Natalie Jennings, and this is episode number 26.
Welcome to a Face Project podcast.
Hello?
It's just pure life. It's pure
My
innocence.
mom
It's
is
pure
brighter.
gratitude.
So I ended up in America.
I am an adopted
because
Korean and have been all my life.
It's a perfect blend of science and creativity.
I was screaming, I will live over here till I die.
Thank you all for tuning in to yet another episode of a Face Project podcast. We are happy to celebrate going into our second year of storytelling, both with the podcast and the magazine. Thanks to all of you listeners and subscribers and storytellers. So if you haven't checked out our previous podcasts, there are 25 other ones to listen to. You can check them out on iTunes, Google Play Music, or head over to afaceproject.com and look under the podcast menu. There you will find all of our episodes, including photographs of each of our storytellers. If you are a fan of the show and the magazine, I'd like to invite you to check out our Facebook group. So if you're on Facebook, check out a Face Project community. There you'll find a few hundred other folks who are fans of the show or the magazine or both, and they are engaging in discussions about the podcasts. We are doing a new feature called Ask the Storyteller. You may have seen this on your Facebook feed if you're already part of the group. Ask the Storyteller features a Facebook Live video of a past storyteller, and they usually do about 10 minutes of question and answer and just engage with the Face Project community. It's a really fun way to ask questions if you've heard an episode that you're really curious about. It's also just a fun way to get to know your favorite storytellers better. So, recap, Facebook has a group for us. It's a Face Project community. Just head on over and request to join. There you will find a bunch of Face Project fans, and we hope to see you there. Thank you so much for supporting us. And a final note on the Facebook Live, we have Julia from episode number 2. If you haven't heard episode number 2, Julia talks about being adopted from Korea as a very young child and then going back to Korea to meet her biological family. She will be live with us on Sunday, May 7th at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. That is in the Facebook community group, so you just search a Face Project community, ask to join. So I have a couple of my own stories to share before we jump into today's story. First and foremost, I'm sure you can tell that I am recovering from completely losing my voice. This episode was supposed to come out a little bit earlier than it is, but I had to wait to get to a point where I could speak. I can still hear it as I'm hearing the playback here. A little squeaky, not really a full voice yet, but I was in Minneapolis at First Avenue last week celebrating the anniversary of Prince passing away. There were a lot of musicians in town. They blocked off the streets, and of course I was out dancing and shouting, and somewhere along the line I lost my voice, and it hasn't come back yet, so it was definitely worth it, but bear with me on this episode. You may also know that I have, if you've been listening to the show, you know that I spent the last 3.5 months in Hawaii, where I used to go to school. I lived there for about 6.5 years and moved back to Minneapolis, which is where I'm originally from. And I'm home again. It is April in Minnesota, and it's been relatively nice. There's been a couple of really, really cold days. I have to admit it's been a really tough adjustment for me. Not just because of the weather, but it was quite an adventure being out in Hawaii, and I got to reconnect with a lot of old friends and make a lot of wonderful new ones. And although my family and dear friends here are wonderful to connect with and see, it's just kind of getting back to life. So back in Minnesota, happy to be here to welcome the summer. I'm going to get going on my garden and a few other things around the house, but I am no longer in Hawaii, and that's the news on my travels. Speaking of travels, that is how this storyteller came to be. If you're familiar with Joseph Mitchell, he was a journalist and writer. In the middle part of the 20th century was probably when he was the most prolific, and he wrote a piece called McSorley's Wonderful Saloon. While I was in college in Hawaii, actually, I had a class called New York Literature that I took, and it was one of my favorite classes, and that was where I was introduced to this piece. And Joseph Mitchell had a talent, a real talent for writing objective pieces in a way that read just like fiction. They're captivating. They're a lot of fun to read. So if you like that kind of stuff, check out Joseph Mitchell. There's a volume of his work called Up in the Old Hotel, and the first story in that piece, it's about 18 or 20 pages long, is McSorley's Wonderful Saloon. Because of this class, I kind of always wanted to visit McSorley's. If you're unfamiliar with McSorley's, it is a gem of a place. Not many places left like it in the country. The oldest operating bar in New York City. I took my mother, who's from northern Minnesota, to Manhattan last year for the first time. She had never been, and she was having a great time, and we were wandering around, and I looked up and I saw the sign for McSorley's, and I said, we have to go in. I've always wanted to go here, and we just kind of stumbled upon it. I wasn't even looking for it. So we went inside, and the bartender, Geoff, said light or dark, and I was delighted because they have maintained almost all of their traditions for the past over 150 years. I believe they opened in 1854. So had a beer and mentioned to the bartender that I was a huge Joseph Mitchell fan and had read the piece. And he was excited because he himself is a writer and hadn't heard anyone reference Joseph Mitchell in quite a while. So we got to talking, and I found out that he is also a published poet, 2 books of poetry on the clientele and the history of the bar itself. There are links on the website of faceproject.com, episode number 26, to Geoff's poetry, or rather his website, where you can purchase his books of poetry. They're really lovely. And I invited him to be on the podcast. He agreed, and I came back to New York a few weeks later, and we sat down together to talk. It was really special. He let me into the pub well before it opened, so we had some time to sit in the creaky wooden chairs, which you will definitely hear in some of the audio. There's some kitchen and bar staff getting ready for the day in the background, but all in all, it was a really special time to just sit in such a special place and have this conversation. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Geoff and McSorley's Wonderful Saloon.
In dear old New York, it's remarkable, very. The name on the lamppost is unnecessary. You merely have to see the girls to know what street you're on. Fifth Avenue beauties and dear old Broadway girls, the tailor-made shoppers, the Avenue A girls. They're strictly all right, but they're different quite in the different parts of town. In old New York,
It's the oldest continuously open and operating bar in New York City. It's from 1854. There's all kinds of history hanging on the walls. There's poster for Lincoln's assassin. There's Houdini's handcuffs he got out of in 1904. There's a 1815 London Times about Napoleon and Wellington. There's ankle irons from Andersonville. It's like a sort of a living museum, and it's sort of stuck in time. And you come in New York, everything changes every 20 years. They just rip everything down and build it up higher. This place is unique. People come in here and they marvel. You're like walking into 19th century New York.
Every night till broad daylight, they dance and sing and talk. The girls are all game and they're jolly good fellows. They're not very swell, but they're none of them jealous. They go it alone in a style of their own on the Bowery in New York.
The draft was on, and I got in the Peace Corps, so I went to Paraguay for a couple years. In any case, when I came back, I got an apartment above the bar here a few years later, and I started drinking here, of course. When you live above a bar, you tend to drink and hang out. I realized I needed to be in one place. My family had moved around like 9 different places ahead of the landlord, and that kind of nonsense that people run into with family problems. So I sank roots here. I grew up in an abusive household. My father was a bad alcoholic, and I was the middle child, and I sort of took the brunt of it. I did take the brunt of it, and physically and emotionally. Without going into the emotional detritus of that time, I escaped into sports, and I went to college on a basketball scholarship, and then I came to New York as soon as I could to go to grad school. And when I was 22, I took a bus here, and I had $600 in my pocket. And I got drunk here the first night I was in New York, and that was in like early September '67. It was close to my mother. She had sort of leaned on me. I don't know why parents lean on the middle child. So no, I maintained connection. She had a bad stroke in '72 and was bedridden for the next 12 and a half years. It was terrible. I would go back once a year. I was not big on going back because I was not fond of my father, to say the least. I started doing cassette tapes back then, and doing one a week and just sending them to her because I couldn't be there. It's weird with stuff like that. You always feel guilty, like you did something, or you should be there. But the choice of going back and trying to take care of your mother, unless no one was there. If my father hadn't been alive, he actually stepped up at that point and stopped drinking and worked, and he hired a nurse today. So it worked out as well as it could have, at least. Ironically enough, I stopped drinking in 1976, and I would always call my mother on Sunday mornings, and he answers the phone all the time, obviously, because she couldn't. And I told him, I stopped drinking. And all he said, here's your mom. And he lived another 4 years and died suddenly. It was as if it never existed. And it was a lot of abuse, and he had an attempted suicide and was in the nut house for a year, and I had almost shot him once after a hunting trip when I was 11. And I mean, a lot of stuff that you would think you would want to sit down man to man and talk about with your father. I never broached it, neither did he. That's probably just as well. I got a job here in June of '72. They just asked me to fill in, so I started filling in because they got to know me, and I was apparently trustworthy. So, and I also entered one of the first writing programs in the city, anyway, up at CCNY. And the first year I had Anthony Burgess in the seminars, and the second year Kurt Vonnegut. So I was already working on a few short stories and things. So I had really good templates to work from. You know, and I'm attached to so many crazy writers who were alcoholic. I was very when I got sober, I took a train ride across Canada to go to Vancouver to say goodbye to Malcolm Lowry, who was buried there, and he rode under the volcano and choked to death on his own vomit. And it was sort of my private goodbye to my own alcoholism. And Joyce is always good. I read through Ulysses when I was in Italy. I read through Ulysses, and on the side I wrote down every word I didn't know, and then looked them up. So I have a sheaf of 300, 400 pages of words. And a lot of them were nonce words just that he made up. In any case, I wrote a couple novels that didn't really go anywhere. And I ended up working here, and that was 44 years ago. So I was always functioning, but you start drinking, and it slides back in the day. It starts in the afternoon, then it starts in the morning. I used to have to drink 3 or 4 doubles of vodka on a Sunday morning before I could call her. Just call her. That's how, pathetic it gets. And I had crazy relationships with women. I ran off with a friend's wife. They were getting divorced, but I ran off before that happened. And she had a 5-year-old daughter. We went to an island off the coast of Maine in January. Crazy things that, any sober person would say, what are you doing here? The last 6, 7 months of my drinking, I started drinking in the morning. I mean, I knew I had a problem, but it was, how do you stop? You stop and you dump the booze out, and then you go buy another bottle a couple hours later, and it just, then you really feel trapped. And a couple of the guys here had gotten sober going to AA, so I asked the guy to take me to a meeting. And, I was getting very black and thinking about suicide, so I thought, let me give this a try. And it took. The lady I first heard was a nurse at St. Vincent's, and I still have lunch with her out in LA, she and her husband. She had a cable guy story, it was good. Sometimes you wonder if you don't get sober just because the stories are so good or so insane. Well, they are. They are. That's an interesting thing. Usually people tell you that you have a problem. No one told me. And these women I had been involved with, a lot of them, had their own issues with men with alcohol and didn't say anything. I don't know why, but it was obvious I never got violent with anybody, never hit anybody. In the bar we had bar brawls and you'd have to grab people and duck. But it was a rougher time back then anyway. Without going into the jargon of the program, usually you will repeat your father's behavior and there's a genetic component to that too. Sure. But you still have to bend your elbow. Of course, you swear you're not going to do what your father did, and then you're doing the same exact damn thing he did, and destroying yourself. And fortunately, I was screwing up some relationships, but I wasn't irresponsible. I wasn't married. I didn't have a child, so it was not as disastrous. But yeah, it was a pattern that I was repeating, and I was mired in self-pity in a lot of ways, which is probably one of the dominant emotional survival emotions. But then it serves you ill when you grow up. It's okay when you're a kid to survive any way you can, but then you have to figure a way to jettison that, or otherwise you're doomed. There were times you'd just sort of break down, and I didn't have panic attacks, but I'd start crying. And just for a couple of minutes, you just start weeping. You sort of keep your head down, not, this is sort of a macho place. The bartender's weeping. What's going on here? But I'm just trying to get through the shift. So after you get a few weeks under your belt, it helps. But then some of the other guys that are drinking heavy at the bar, they feel betrayed. So one time they filled a 7-Up bottle, a little one with scotch, and gave it to me when I ordered a 7-Up. And I got a mouthful, I just spat it on the bar, and I was pissed. Then they respected it after that. But you will be tested, as they say. The downside of making a decision like that is you lose a lot of friends, drinking friends. The guys, the best friends from college, I became persona non grata. That hurt, but it was either me or getting sober, or it becomes a survival thing. And I'm not being dramatic. Literally it is. We all know people who, whatever their addiction, it'll take them down. The best part of all that was finding my wife. I went and met in the program. She had a horrific story. So yeah, someone who understands where you're coming from is very important. She had cancer. She had cancer when our son was 5. She had a terrible operation, a radical neck discectomy, and she was a very beautiful woman and real stylish, and got her PhD and was a professor. And anyway, she had throat and neck cancer, and she had radiation, and then she was okay for 15 years. And then in 2002, she she came back, and then there was another 15-hour operation, and they had to do all kinds of horrific things to save her. And then from then on, it was like 4 years of operations and chemos. And you don't drink one day at a time because you're certainly, it's like an invitation to jump off a cliff. There are terrible, cruel things that happen, though, in life. My wife, she was a wonderful French cook and cooked professionally. And the disease, the last 4 years, the tumor was in her throat. They had to cut it out, had to butterfly her skull, take her, and she couldn't swallow. So she had to be tube fed for the last 4 years. That was like, yeah, sometimes the cruelty can really, you wonder what kind of God is this that allows, the thing that bothers me most in the 12-step programs is that people will give God the credit for all the good things, but not the responsibility for all the cruel things that happen, whether it's children dying of disease or just the random pain and cruelty that adults have to go through to die. There's obviously terrible things and beautiful things. And it's sort of crazy because you sort of rise to the occasion when these big, terrible things happen. It's the little things that really can drive people to drink, whether it's, it's the old stubbing your toe and you get pissed off, or something doesn't work, or you get up in the morning and you drop the coffee, or you just want to say, screw it all, I don't care. Because you realize as an addict, the personality is very black and white. Whether it's relationships, life, anything, it's either all or nothing. The gift of being sober and finding the right woman, and then we had a son, and the chance to be a good father to my son. I got to heal myself by being a good father and a good husband. You go through all these things, so I never could get out of the bar. So I figured, okay, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. It pays the bills and allowed my wife to go back to, get her PhD and do what she wanted to do. And, you make choices. Well, I've written 2 books of poetry about the place, so I'm sort of the dean of lunacy here. It's been a wonderful place to work. I love it because it's so old school democratic, because we get all different kinds of people, laborers, workers, lawyers, students, tourists, from all over the world now. You get to see all different kinds of people and great lunatic conversations between people and what's going on in their lives, little snatches here and there. All this stuff is original. It's all original, and a lot of it's taped together. Probably my favorite one is the 1948 Babe Ruth photo behind the bar. I wrote a poem about that. Nat Fein, Fein. He died a few years ago. He used to come in a lot. He gave that the original, one of the original copies. Can you have an original copy? I don't know, a signed original print of the Pulitzer Prize photo of Babe Ruth saying farewell at Yankee Stadium. There's something very poignant about that. Il Bambino, Babe Ruth. Nat Fein's 1948 Pulitzer Prize photograph of the dying Babe Ruth bidding farewell to all at Yankee Stadium hangs over the original ale pumps at McSorley's. This is a good place to stop and rest, where so many have come. It is right for me to gaze from here, above the old ale pumps, sun off the shining brass in early afternoons, same glares at the plate. This is a good home. Millions of eyes upon me, upon these spindly limbs. This is not how it ends. Saturday nights, I hear them surrounded by history. I hear them wondering about me and my time, what it must have been like, a patient babe in the howling crowd, waiting for the pitch. The roar of roaring throngs, seamed orb descending home, laughter and hope. Oh, fickle God of shows, who gave me great days, who gave me this exit. Goodbye to all Yankees. The whole damn crowd fused into this cancerous lump.
Casey saw all the game, knew the players by their first names, told the umpire he was wrong all along, good and strong. When the score was just 2-2, Casey knew what to do, so just to cheer up the boys she knew, she made the gang sing this song. Take me out to the ball game, take me out with the crowd. Oh, buy me some peanuts and cracker jack. I don't care if I never get back. Let's see Ruth for the home. Don't wait, it's a shame.
But it was a smaller world back then. You could have, we had a lot of World War II guys, and they were beautiful guys, and they were very upset when the women came in 1970. It was an all-male bar until 1970, and then there was a lawsuit, and then, we had a whole cadre of 20 or 30 or 40 guys from World War II, and they tell war stories. Some were Ukrainians, and because it was Polish guys who had fought with the Russians. I mean, they get into arguments about the war. And this is back in the 70s, so they were sort of in the twilight of their lives. And then they slowly disappeared in the last 10 years. Everybody's dying off. And New York has changed. There's no single-room occupancy hotels where old guys could live on a pension, or whether it's railroad or Social Security. They can't afford to live here. So you'll see pictures on the walls of old guys, and then we don't have an old clientele anymore. It's, 20s and 30s, and then people who stop back in 20 years later and show their kids. Light and dark ale, that's all they've ever served here. You don't see too many really drunk people, because we won't serve people who are already drunk. It's just not worth the headache. They're talking about just the normal grist of daily life. You know, how screwed up their relationship is with whether it's their girlfriend or their boyfriend or their wife or their parents or jobs. People are weird. We usually don't throw people out, but we just tell them we're pretty simple here. It's either light or dark ale. If you don't like it, there's 16,000 other joints in the city. Try one of those. Almost every bar in New York caters to a certain slice.
That's right.
And here you get the mix, and that's what makes it so wonderful as a place. And why I think that's why people come back too. There's always sawdust on the floor. In this generation, nobody knows why there's sawdust on the floor. There used to be sawdust everywhere when I was growing up in butcher shops and bars. It just keeps the floor clean. Whatever's going on the floor, it's going to gather it up. The food pretty much is the same. If you read Joe Mitchell's piece from 1940 on McSorley's wonderful Saloon, it's called. It's an 18, 20-page piece. And it sort of has notes of what I've said about the bar being just sort of quirky and nuts and crazy regulars. But there's just cheese plates and cold sandwiches, and you can get a burger now and maybe a hot plate, whatever's special. But it's very simple food. It's very inexpensive for New York. And you get a free trip through time. People, they say, you're here 44 years, and oh my God, it's a lifetime and everything. And it goes really fast, guys. I hate to tell you. My only caveat would be careful what you start doing, because you may well end up doing it. So you better make sure you like it a little bit anyway. I want to sculpt. Sounds crazy. I sort of want to throw away my mind and just work with my hands and just sculpt heads, busts of clay, I did it once when I was in Paraguay. And I really connected with that. And it's obviously a very tactile, different kind of thing. Start doing it this summer and see what could happen. If you think you have a problem with some alcohol or a drug, ask for help. Can't be done. You can't do it yourself. Yeah, I mean, there are people who can, but the odds are not even good if you get help. Even if you go to some 12-step program, the odds are 5 to 10% that you'll stay sober. So it's the ball, you're behind the black ball to begin with. So ask for help and take help. And that's one of the hardest things to do for anybody, is to be able to say, I can't deal with this. And there's no shame in asking for help if you want to live. I've seen many people, good friends, die because they're too damn stubborn to ask for help. They wouldn't listen. Go to meetings and I help people privately. I'm not a big rah-rah person, but a friend of mine in New York said, this guy's really got a problem. Could you talk to him? He does. So I did. We had dinner, and 2 years later he called me up and he thanked me profusely for that. And I thought, we just had dinner and I just talked about my experience. But you never know when you're going to help somebody by just spending an hour with them. They got to want to sit down and listen to somebody else. Once you hear somebody else talk, you realize you're not alone. The bar has taught me that we're just sort of flotsam, passing through time, and that's frightening, but it's exhilarating at the same time, if you will. And for me, trying to find the gratitude for both of those things simultaneously is very difficult. The concept of linear time is very difficult. It's scary because you're nearing the end, like I might live another 10 years, I might drop dead tomorrow. If I drop dead tomorrow, I'll be a happy man. I was a good husband, a good father, and I got sober. And after, and I wrote a couple books. What else is there? You go have a good meal, And I also know that there are no happy endings there. So you have to prepare yourself somewhere in one of your compartments of your head. There are no happy endings. So unless you die in your sleep or in the bar. God forbid. God forbid.
It's remarkable, very. The name on the lamppost is unnecessary. You merely have to see the ghost to know what street you're on. Fifth Avenue beauties and dear old Broadway goes. The tailor-made shoppers, the Avenue A goes. They're strictly all right, but they're different quite in the...
Thank you for listening, everyone. Again, if you would like to see photographs of Geoff or all of the fun details mentioned about McSorley's, some inside shots of the bar itself, head to afaceproject.com, look under the podcast menu, and just try and scroll down and look for episode number 26, Geoff. We have 4 magazines complete, which means volume 1 of our magazine is complete, all 4 issues. If you would like to check out a free sample of our magazine, see what it looks like, and decide if you'd like a full year's worth of print or digital issues, head to afaceproject.com, click on the big green bar at the top. There's a big green bar, whether you're on your phone or a desktop. Just click on that, throw in your email, and we will send you a free digital copy of the magazine. Once again, for more of Geoff's poetry, head over to our website. There you'll find links to his website and other relevant links to this story, including recommendations for anyone suffering from drug or alcohol addiction. One final note. We are looking for support. We can't do this podcast without you, and we are forever grateful for our subscribers and our supporters. There are a couple of ways you can support us. One, by just listening and subscribing on iTunes, leaving a review. 2, by becoming a magazine subscriber, heading to the website, checking out our digital and print magazines. You can buy a subscription for yourself, or maybe you'd like to buy a subscription as a gift for someone in your life who likes storytelling and photography. Finally, we have a sort of NPR-style membership that you can join as a contributor. A one-time donation, a sustaining contribution of $5, $1, $10, whatever you are able to give. Your support is how we stay afloat. So if you'd like to support us, listen to the podcast, subscribe to the magazine, or just contribute in any way that you're able to. This episode was recorded and produced by me. Web layout and design by Aaron Woods. Photography by Natalie Jennings. Music in the public domain. Thank you all for listening. We will be back in a couple of weeks.
The Silence of Thumbs. The men's room in McSorley's not only contains the original urinals, but the door itself is unique. Many millions of thumbs have created a silky smooth crater beneath the door handle. There is now a tiny hole where the wood has been worn through. Silence of thumbs. Who ever heard of a shithouse door with mullioned windows hiding those huge urinals? Yet she's there, promising relief. Above the door it says $2 show. But it is also here, the silent sliding of thumb over wood. In opening this door, a smooth hole in time. Each man rubbing free a molecule of wood, leaving a tiny hole in this greater fabric, which with time will grow larger. The door, most likely, will disappear, and thumbs being what they are, this will all begin again. Shut up down there. He worked last night too.